Hi, welcome back to my channel where I talk all about mental health. A big thank you to everybody who watched my last video, which was posted on Sunday, where I talked all about being diagnosed with bipolar disorder and having my first psychotic episode. Thank you to everybody who watched it, who liked it, who shared it, and who subscribed to my channel. If you would like to keep watching videos about mental health, please subscribe to my channel so that you can stay in the loop when I post a new video. So today I'm going to talk about health anxiety, which is an anxiety disorder which falls into the OCD spectrum. This is something that I'm still struggling with, dealing with myself, so it's not going to be as easy to talk about as bipolar disorder was, but it'll be fine. We'll get through it. Hopefully I'll make it to the end of this video without crying, but we'll see. So anxiety in itself is debilitating. Health anxiety is quite frankly awful. It is basically where you excessively worry about your health. You are constantly seeking assurance from other people to check that everything's okay. You excessively Google your symptoms. You might go to the doctors a lot and never feel satisfied with the answer. Health anxiety is also known as hypochondria, which I have put in the title of this video because I wasn't sure everyone would know what health anxiety actually is. But I don't really like the term hypochondria because I think it takes away, it takes the seriousness away from the disorder itself. We've all heard somebody be called a hypochondriac in a way to make them feel like they're being dramatic. Maybe somebody says, I've got a cold, I want to go to the doctor, and then somebody else will say, you're such a hypochondriac. So I just don't like that. I think the term health anxiety is much better suited because it acknowledges that it is an anxiety disorder, which it is. So yeah. So I've had health anxiety for 2 years now. I get it around the winter months, so January and December time. This is because of a couple of things that have happened to me over the years. So in 2011, I was hospitalized with pneumonia, and the pneumonia was left so long that it caused my lung to collapse. I was put on an intensive care ward for 2 weeks. I had a chest drain inserted into my lung, which drained 2 litres of fluid. I was very poorly, and for a few months after everything happened, I was housebound for quite a while. It was horrendous and I was very sick, but I got through it, and you know, the rest of the year was fine, and the following 2 years were fine. But then 3 years later, I was admitted to hospital again, this time in the early weeks of January 2015. I had been having severe sickness symptoms, so diarrhea, abdominal cramps, sickness. I was in and out of consciousness a lot, and a year prior to this I had visited the GP 20 times with similar symptoms, especially abdominal cramps and severe weight loss. But I was often fobbed off with women's troubles, and being a hormonal young woman, I was actually called a hypochondriac. So yeah, I wasn't believed for an entire year. Things got out of hand. I was admitted to hospital. I had my appendix removed because I'd been admitted with suspected appendicitis, but it turns out a week later the appendix wasn't the problem, my large bowel was the problem. It was actually very close to perforating, so nobody had been to see me in this time. I was just having my pain relief upped by the nurses. I actually heard my large bowel start to pop, which was terrifying. I screamed out for my mum ran to get the doctors, and next thing I know I'm being wheeled down for emergency surgery to have a colectomy, which meant my large bowel was removed. I was then given a stoma bag, which is basically where the end of my small bowel was brought out to the surface of my abdomen, and I pooed in a bag for 10 months. Obviously I was only 19 at the time, so it was pretty horrendous for me. I'd gone in somebody that was very body conscious and come out with a stoma bag, which in the end was fine, but obviously at the time was very scary. So yeah, that's why I now have health anxiety. So my health anxiety is triggered, and it happens around the end of the year, beginning of a year. I start to become incredibly worried about being sick. So I had the worst bout of health anxiety at the end of 2017. It was absolutely horrendous. As somebody that has 4 mental health diagnoses, health anxiety was just the worst time I'd ever experienced, and I think that's saying a lot. It all started on Christmas Eve. I had been very stressed over the Christmas period, and I'd actually developed something called a scalloped tongue, which is where your tongue gets dense around it because it's been compressed against your teeth. I thought I was getting sick. Like, I didn't know what this was, and I was freaking out. And I think the reason I was freaking out more was because I knew it was Christmas Eve and the doctors were going to be closed, so I couldn't go and see anybody for my tongue problem, which, when I look back at that now, I'm like, that really wasn't that much of a big deal, but at the time it was. So this triggered my health anxiety because I knew that there was next to no way I'd be able to get into a doctor if anything was to go wrong. So yeah, on Christmas Eve I was very stressed, and over the next few days my health anxiety worsened. I started becoming very panicked about becoming very sick. And now my health anxiety, everybody kind of has their own thing. So some people might worry about cancer or tumours or diseases or death. I worry about becoming critically ill and not being able to cope. I'm not ready to talk about exactly what my main fear is because I struggle to say it out loud myself, and I'm not really ready to share it with the world. But to give you sort of an idea, I panic about having blood clots and rashes on my legs. I don't know where this fear has come from. It's an irrational fear, but it's one that literally ruined my life for the entirety of January. So it was a Christmas week and I'd become very scared. I was having chronic headaches every day. I was having nightmares every night. I was waking up shaking. I was having heart palpitations. I was having hot and cold flushes. I had a constant feeling of adrenaline because my body was going into fight or flight mode, which is basically how your body reacts to danger. So I felt like I was constantly in danger. I was waiting for something to go wrong and for me to end up being very, very sick. It was taking over every hour of every day. I was constantly checking my body for symptoms. And the problem was that because I was experiencing all of these physical anxiety symptoms, it was really hard not to tell myself that I wasn't getting poorly, because obviously when you're feeling nauseous and you're shaking and you're feeling hot and cold, the first thing you think of is, oh, I'm getting sick. So over right up until New Year's is when it was just sort of non-stop, and I ended up going to stay with my mum because I live with my partner and my 2 cats, but every time I've been sick my mum's been there to look after me, and I felt safe with my mum, so I went and stayed with my mum, left my boyfriend here, and that kind of helped me. It kind of helped me a bit because I knew that if anything was to go wrong I could wake her up in the middle of the night and be taken to hospital. So it came to New Year's and I'd had a chronic headache all day, so I'd taken some cocodamol and I decided it's New Year's Eve, I'm just going to go out, I'm going to have a nice time. So I went out with my parents, my boyfriend and their friends. Because I'd taken the cocodamol, which I'd forgotten about, I had a drink and my vision went very blurry and I felt a little bit sick, and this panicked me even more. Long story short, by 9 o'clock I'd gone home and I sobbed the entire night with my boyfriend calming me down because I couldn't take it anymore. The only way I can describe it is imagine your worst fear, times that by 10, and then imagine having that fear 24 hours a day. That is what health anxiety was like for me. It was absolutely awful. On New Year's Day, I'd woken up shaking and I decided I can't physically handle this anymore. It had got to the point over the past week where I'd started to question whether I wanted to be here anymore. And I've said that in the past when I've had like a manic episode with bipolar disorder, or when my OCD has got too much, but for the first time I said this and I meant it, and that terrified me. So what I did was I called my mental health team, who referred me to 111, who then told me to go straight to A&E. I waited for 5 hours in A&E to see an on-duty psychiatrist and another specialist. I saw them, I completely broke down. I said that the health anxiety is meaning that I cannot function. I'd had to take time off work because I couldn't concentrate. Every hour of the day was dedicated to being terrified about getting critically sick. They referred me to the crisis team. I talked about the crisis team in my last video. It's basically a mental health emergency service for people who are a danger to themselves or who are in crisis. I was obviously in crisis. So the next day, the crisis team came out to me, and I saw the crisis team for the first 2 weeks every day, and then for one further week every other day. They would come out to me and talk to me. They would teach me coping mechanisms, and they were just there to listen and to basically check that I wasn't gonna do anything silly. The first week was really hard. I really felt like I didn't want to be here. I struggled to talk about my main fear, which my mum calls my hot thought. So your hot thought is what you are most terrified of. And I couldn't say mine out loud. And one thing that I will stick with me is that one of the people from the crisis team said, it's as if you're so afraid of your own thoughts that you're just letting them control your life. And I was like, well, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. I only actually managed to say my hot thought out loud twice, and it was such a relief when I actually got to say it because it made it seem less scary. But the only other ways that I'd really been coping while seeing the crisis team were I had all of my medication upped. I was given sleeping pills, I was started on anxiety medication, and I was also given a stronger anxiety medication which will also help me sleep. So I saw the crisis team for 3 weeks. I managed to get my hot thought out twice. I had my medication upped. After I was discharged from the crisis team, I felt better. My health anxiety wasn't cured, but from having somebody to come out and talk to me every day or every other day sort of kept me going, and it motivated me to keep going and keep talking, because every time I was talking it made me feel better, but it didn't cure my health anxiety. I really wish there was more of a positive outcome. I mean, it is sort of positive, but my health anxiety isn't cured. It's something I'm very much still struggling with, not to the extent that it was. I really feel it got to the extent because I was struggling with it alone, and it was all in my head, and my head was so loud and it was racing a mile a minute, and I didn't know how to get it out. And so having somebody to come out and talk to me so that I could get it out of my system was really helpful. But there are still days where it feels like it's controlling my life. There's still days where I have horrendous nightmares. There's still days where I have that horrible, not nervous feeling in my stomach. But I am actually undergoing CBT for this. So that's one thing that's really recommended for health anxiety, is to undergo CBT. So I'm hoping this will, in the long term, be really helpful for me. On Twitter, a few people asked me a couple of questions about health anxiety that I just wanted to answer now. Somebody said, how can you cope with health anxiety? Is there any ways? And there are actually a few ways. Distracting yourself, so going for a walk, calling a friend, listening to some music and singing along to the lyrics in your head, or watching a film, or just going out is going to help take your mind off things. It's all about distractions. I'm not going to say it's going to cure you for longer than an hour, but if you can focus your mind on something else other than your health, then it will really help. Another way is to draw a grid, and in the left column write down what's wrong with you, and in the right column write down a rational explanation. So maybe in the left column you would write, I have a headache, and then in the right column you would write, well, a headache can be a consequence of stress. So it's all about rational thinking, and it helps to remind yourself that there are a lot of reasons as to why something could be going on. Another thing is to avoid Google at all costs, and this is easier said than done, and I am so guilty. Last night I was just Googling my symptoms, like I'm so guilty of doing it, but if you can deter yourself from doing it, maybe when you I don't know, put a block on your phone so that you can't use Google, or maybe a wallpaper reminder on your phone to avoid Google. The thing that you need to remember with Google is that when you search for a disease or you search for your symptoms, Google's going to show you every possible explanation, and half the time, well, about 90% of these times, none of this is going to be wrong with you. I actually spoke to a paramedic the other day who said a lot of people actually end up ringing ambulances because they've seen stuff on Google and there's been nothing wrong with them. So we are all guilty of it. We're all guilty of Googling a symptom, but try not to do it because it is the worst thing in the world for health anxiety. Another person asked whether health anxiety can be triggered, and I think, as I've proved, yes, health anxiety can be triggered, but also anxiety, unfortunately, chooses you. You do not choose it. So sometimes people just have health anxiety for no explanation. They just have it and it really sucks, but there are ways, as I've mentioned, that you can learn to cope, but ultimately CBT is your go-to. So I think that's it. I would like to talk more about health anxiety, but I'm gonna leave that for other videos because, as I said, it's something that I'm still struggling with, and I don't feel quite ready to talk about everything that's gone on. So hopefully this video will be informative enough. I'm not sure how long I've gone on for now, but hopefully people will take something away from this video. If there's anything that I would like people to take from this video, is that health anxiety is horrible. It's not just worrying about getting a cold or a sore throat. And if you know anybody with health anxiety, or you think somebody may be suffering with it, then please support them, please listen to them, please encourage them to get help, and please don't make them feel like they're being over dramatic or ridiculous, because health anxiety is very debilitating and it can be very helpful to talk about it, and if they feel like they have somebody to talk about it, then it might get easier for them. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you would like to watch more of my videos, I'm not sure what I'm going to be talking about next week, but I upload every Sunday at 3 p.m, so please subscribe to my channel so that you can get notifications for when I next upload. Okay, so I will see you next week. Bye! 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 I can't. Bye. I don't know what happened to my voice there, but bye. See you next Sunday.